If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
Imagine this scenario. Satellite communications are degrading across the eastern seaboard. GPS spoofing confirmed near 3 major port complexes. And container traffic is grinding to a halt. The FAA just issued a ground stop for all commercial flights east of the Mississippi. And again, this is a scenario I'm painting. Cellular networks in the DC corridor are experiencing cascading failures. Rolling blackouts are spreading south from New York through Virginia. ATM networks are offline, and credit card processing has collapsed nationwide. Emergency broadcast tones are firing in 12 states. Hospitals are switching to backup power as grid instability hammers critical infrastructure. The National Guard is mobilizing in 6 states. This is not a simulation. This is what happens when someone seizes the high ground above you and flips the switch. Who's the enemy? Well, the enemy in this scenario is the CCP infrastructure empire. So Beijing has constructed a sprawling military space apparatus designed to blind, disable, and destroy American satellites in the opening minutes of any conflict. For those of you who've been following us for some period of time, you may remember me mentioning that we caught them wargaming against satellites, some of which were made to resemble our satellites, and it was pretty clear what they were up to. So China has deployed direct ascent anti-satellite missiles, ground-based lasers that damage satellite sensors, co-orbital kill vehicles, and robotic arm satellites to physically grab and drag our spacecraft out of operational orbits. Their military doctrine demands the destruction of enemy reconnaissance and communication satellites to deafen and paralyze the adversary before ground combat begins. This is what they want. They want to own the orbit, everything in orbit, so they can cripple American military command, collapse our satellite-dependent infrastructure, and dominate the global system without ever setting foot on our soil. They're not building a space program. They're building a weapons platform to control everything beneath it. Welcome back to Survival Dispatch News. It's February 16th, 2026, and I'm Chris Heaven, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. Tonight, I'm joined by my good friend Randy Nance, back home in Texas, combat wounded Green Beret, and Jeff MD, 26-year CIA case officer, author extraordinaire, affectionately known as 007. Tonight, we're going to be tackling one of the most critical national security topics of our generation. Who will rule space? So here's your bottom line up front. The space colonization race. The next empire is orbital. Space is no longer science fiction. It's strategic high ground. Satellites, space-based communications, surveillance platforms, and orbital weapons will determine who controls the global system. Whoever dominates orbit will dominate Earth's infrastructure, economies, and military command. Why does it matter? Well, the space race is no longer about exploration. It's about power projection on a scale most Americans cannot comprehend. The nation that controls orbit controls everything below it. So what are we covering tonight? Well, obviously, we're going to cover China. We're going to cover Russia's anti-satellite weapons programs, America's Golden Dome missile defense initiative, the vulnerability of GPS and satellite infrastructure, and what happens when orbital systems go dark, and how you prepare your family for it. So let me get the boys on stage here as we roll into segment number 1. Good to see y'all. What's it been? It's been about maybe 4 minutes since I saw y'all, at least. All right, so let's jump into segment number 1. It's titled The Orbital Battlefield, Why Space is the New Front Line. So space is now a contested warfare fighting domain where China, Russia, and the United States are racing to deploy weapon systems that can destroy, disable, or hijack each other's satellites. Whoever wins this race will literally control global military command. The U.S. Space Force is accelerating counter space weapons deployment under a Trump administration directive demanding American dominance, but congressional reports warn that China is way ahead in key areas, including anti-satellite missiles and on-orbit counter space capabilities. Space Force General Chance Saltzman has made space superiority the #1 priority, stating that it unlocks superiority in every other domain, fuels coalition lethality, and fortifies troop survivability, making it the foundation from which joint force projects power. Jeff, I'm going to come straight to you on this. When our Space Force leadership says China is ahead on counter space capabilities, what systems are they referring to? And by your guesstimation, I'm just asking you to speculate, how far behind do you think we are?
They have a number of systems, and we have some too. I mean, we're not without our capabilities either. But they've used high-power ground-based lasers, or potentially even airborne lasers, to hit satellites and take out sensors. You know, if you have an electro-optical satellite like a KH-11 or something like that, you know, it's staring down at the Earth. It's like a Hubble Space Telescope, except pointed down. But you know, if you hit that with a laser, you screw up all the sensors and everything. You know, you basically have a big tube that won't work anymore. That's one. The other is you have satellite systems that, especially for low Earth orbit, you can actually launch them from airplanes. That will take a missile, it'll go into low Earth orbit, and you know, it explodes near a satellite. It's fragmentation, you know, just like anti-aircraft. Or you can have the kind that are kinetic kill vehicles, which will actually hit the satellite. Other options are you get into the orbit of the targeted satellite, and then you basically explode debris. And if you have a satellite and it's going, you know, 40,000 miles an hour, if it hits a grain of sand, it's like getting shot with a 308. The kinetic energy on something like that is just off the charts. So it doesn't take much.
That's interesting, Jeff. So, Randy, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I mean, being a Green Beret, being in the military, this previous administration, the old Biden administration that was installed, they completely refused to develop any offensive space weapons, which set us back even further. I'm just curious, why do you think they did that? They watched our adversaries power ahead and just hit the pause button. It was because they've got TDS and they hate Trump and it was Trump's thing, or is there something more to them neglecting it?
Honestly, I think the TDS is just a byproduct, right? It's what they're trying to do, you know, and let's look at everything else they did intentionally. Throwing out all this money, hiding all this gold, letting all the millions and millions, tens of millions of people come in that were not, well, let's just say they're not optimum candidates for immigration. And you look at everything else they did intentionally to destroy this country, or at least unravel the fabric of this constitutional republic. I think that's what they're doing, in my opinion. And this just goes right along with it. You know, let's talk about when he sold off all the gas and the oil reserves. You know, Obama sold off the uranium reserves to Russia, which, you know, was illegal, but they still did it. So all those are intentional acts. And yes, they hate Trump because he's spoiling their plan and they want to take him out at the same time. Why wouldn't you? But, you know, this is just strategy. They want the United States to fail, so they didn't do anything about that when they knew China was. Now, I'll go back to saying I don't ever think that, again, I don't know, it's in IT, and this is going to be some type of technical equipment that they're probably pretty good at. But when I look at their military equipment and how their tactics, you know, China sucks. So that's in our favor, but I don't know, you know, how that's going to translate into space. because the reason we would want to do that, it's because everybody else is now. And the fact is, it's always been, since we were throwing rocks at each other, if someone was on the high ground and dropped a rock on you, it was a whole lot easier to kill you, wasn't it? It's no different. Let's go to the Civil War, Little Round Top. That one little hill saved them barrage after barrage after barrage because they had the high ground. And it's no different. Space is the ultimate high ground if we're talking about coming back down onto the surface of Earth. And, even aircraft having, air superiority would be compromised to the point you wouldn't have it. So that's how important this stuff is. And the fact that they didn't do anything about it while they knew China was, and I'm talking about the Biden administration, it was just like all the printing of the money. It was all intentional.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I appreciate it. Jeff, before I come to you with the next question, somebody said something that part of 9/11 2.0 has got a plot to take out Trump. Well, ironically enough, we were the very first ones to report this. Going on maybe 19, 20 months now. Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers is a personal friend of mine. And on a Sunday night, we were talking. And while we were talking, he got intelligence from the border of cartel members and Hezbollah members with 9 man pads, which are shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles, specifically to assassinate Donald Trump. We now know that number is somewhere between 40 and 50 in the country. So when we get to the sit rep, I'll speak a little bit more on that. But yes, not only have we mentioned it, we were the very first ones to mention it that had concrete proof of Hezbollah targeting Donald Trump. So Jeff, I'm curious, what does it look like operationally if an adversary takes out even a handful of our GPS or communication satellites? Like, how big of a hit is that?
Well, for the GPS satellites, it's a big deal because a lot of our smart weapons, most of our smart weapons, are GPS targeted. The long range ones are generally GPS. Short range, you can do laser. You can have a drone or an airplane or even someone on the ground with a laser, and they can do target designation, and then you drop a paveway and take them out. But when you're trying to do over the horizon stuff that's hundreds or thousands of miles away, GPS is the best system. It's not the only system, because before GPS, we still had ICBMs. They weren't as accurate, but they still hit their targets, and they used inertial guidance systems, gyroscopes and the like. And gyroscope technology now is a lot better than it used to be. They're not mechanical. They use ring laser gyros, which are, they use light and fiber optic cable to do it. But you look at the navigation of ships, you look at airplanes, you look at all that. Almost all of them depend on GPS to tell them where they are and where they're going. So if you start taking out GPS satellites, and you have to take them all out, you take enough out to disrupt the system, because an airplane flying, it's talking to this GPS satellite, and then it goes around the Earth, and then it'll pick up the next one. Well, if there's not a next one to pick up, it's basically got dead air. So yeah, that's a big problem. Then of course, communication satellites, the same thing. We have, the way we communicate with our submarines at sea is they get what's called an ELF signal, extremely low frequency signal. And it's just a handful of letters because it takes so long to transmit. But it usually tells them when to come to the surface, and then they put up probably a laser antenna or something like that, and they communicate with the satellite. Well, if the satellite's not there, no one to communicate with.
Yeah, so on a slightly different tangent, but related to this, I didn't put this in the brief. So one of my Delta contacts, I mentioned it on Friday night, messaged me about 2.5 weeks ago saying, hey, we're getting deployed to the Middle East. Don't have a destination yet, but when I get there, I'll keep you updated. So he ended up messaging me on Friday and said that he was in Israel, and he's a Delta commander. He has 2 6-man teams with him. And he said that he was at a command post that had 40 different countries there, military-wise. An interesting number, there were 50 support personnel, or there are 50 support personnel supporting the Delta teams. And their job, if we go into Iran, is to take out some sensitive targets, something that would essentially get the IRGC, out of power, sort of thing. He didn't go into great detail, and if he did, I wouldn't talk about it anyway. But Jeff, give me the lowdown on ground mark stuff. So when we send guys in like Randy, and they get to a physical location and they give that location, does that still require the satellites, or does that allow them to lock in on it with missiles? You're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry, it depends on the system you're using to target them. You may put special operators on the ground to confirm, like if you're going after a person, you don't want to blow up a building if he's not in it. So you may have someone on site who is to confirm that the target is present. And you maybe call it the head of the IRGC. When we took out Soleimani, we had to have intelligence that he was there before we did it. And so we'd make sure we didn't, waste our capabilities taking out, a pickup truck or something. The other one you could do is have, SF guys on the ground to market. Now that could be that could be an IR beacon, that could be a laser, that could be, any number of things. And that would be for like a paveway type, 2,000-pound bomb with a laser guided system on it. But then that would be dropped from an airplane, probably not a missile. Missiles tend to use GPS. When GPS gets jammed, they have other guidance systems that can take over. The early cruise missiles, which really didn't have GPS because GPS didn't exist then, they actually used terrain matching. They had a memory on board that knew exactly what the mountains looked like and the cities looked like, and they could use that and say, okay, we are exactly here. And I remember talking to a guy, and this was back in the 90s, and I said, how accurate are they? And he goes, pick a city anywhere in the United States. I said, okay, Chicago. He goes, okay, now pick a building. And I said, okay, John Hancock building. He goes, pick a floor. I go, okay, 32nd floor. Which window? Third one from the left. You want the upper or the lower half of that window?
Wow.
And that was from like 2,000 miles away.
Wow.
But it takes a lot of memory and a lot of prep to get that. You have to have all that information to put into the guidance system. So you've got to have hyper accurate, maps and photos and things like that. But it is super accurate. And the thing is, it doesn't depend on satellites.
Wow. That's absolutely amazing. So Randy, being a Green Beret, I mean, you obviously ran ops on the ground. If we lost our satellites, what's the effect to you guys that are on the ground running ops? Like, obviously it's serious, but maybe give us an idea of how it would hinder you from doing your job.
Well, one of the things it would do is we would lose a big piece of communication that we can use, right? Satellite is we have some classified radios that use satellite. That would be ineffective. All the vehicles have FBCB2s. Now, I don't know if they're still using them to the day. I would assume they are, or they've got an updated version. And what that is your Blue Force tracker, right? So you can now, back in 2003, not every single vehicle had one. So not everybody was on the map, but most, do. And you can see all those vehicles where they actually are on the map. You would lose all that. So you might have more friendly fire incidences in the fog and the confusion of war. But all these other things that we talked about, all these some other weapon systems, I mean, it would be very detrimental. Could we go back to some other methods? Yes. But the problem is people haven't really been using those. And it depends on how trained up folks are and then how capable everybody is of getting that stuff together. If we lost all our satellites, for one, that's what everybody now is using for land nav, period. That's what every single person has. When I first got in the Army, they didn't even have GPSs actually in the Army. Now they did. They had this thing called the plugger, and it was like this big, and it had an arrow that kind of pointed the direction that you needed to go. I wish I could remember exactly how to work it. It wasn't exactly easy. There was a class you had to go through. You had to learn how to work this thing to be able to use it in land nav. And I suspect it's one of the reasons the Jessica Lynch thing went the way they did, because if I remember right, that first sergeant that got them all discombobulated there was using a plugger. And then very shortly after that, you saw people going to anywhere and buying civilian GPS units. Like it was almost instantaneous.
Yeah. All right, Randy. So let me get us over on another studio here. All right. Apologies. Didn't get you guys over there fast enough at the beginning. So let's move into segment number 2, China's anti-satellite weapons and orbital warfare. So China's deployed direct descent anti-satellite missiles, ground-based lasers, co-orbital interference platforms, and robotic armed satellites capable of physically grabbing and disabling American spacecraft, creating what military analysts call a layered kill web in orbit. The Chinese military doctrine explicitly calls for destroying, damaging, and interfering with enemy reconnaissance and communication satellites to blind and deafen the adversary before ground combat even begins. Russia is developing nuclear anti-satellite weapons that could disable hundreds of satellites in a single detonation through radiation effects and electromagnetic pulse, and both nations vetoed a UN resolution reaffirming the ban on nuclear weapons in space. So, Jeff, how does China's robotic arm satellite technology change the calculus of orbital warfare compared to traditional kinetic warfare vehicles?
Yeah, I think the robotic arm one would be more like if you wanted to capture a satellite.
Yeah.
And take a piece off of it or something and somehow get it back to Earth, like a film drop satellite, like in the old days. It's, you have to catch up to it. You got to match speed. You got to get close, but not too close, and then reach out and grab it. And it's very complex, very complicated. If you're just trying to destroy it, there's a hell of a lot better ways to do it. I mean, how you could literally get fairly close to it and fire a damn shotgun at it. Satellites are not that robust. You take out the solar arrays, things like that, you cut their power, they go away. It'd be a lot easier. You could literally get in its orbit and just drop ball bearings or, freaking, literally, chunks of metal. And when it flies into them, it shred it. So that would be something if you're trying to recover a satellite, and they may be using it too to recover some of their own, because if you have a satellite that goes down, the last thing you want is somebody else to get a hold of it either. But it sounds like the old James Bond movie, I think it was You Only Live Twice, where they were going up in space and capturing US and Russian spaceships with astronauts on board because they were trying to start World War III. Is it possible? Sure. The space shuttle did it 30 years ago. They had the arm and they would go up and grab a satellite and bring it on board and bring it home. But for destroying a satellite, it's kind of overkill. It's not necessary.
Okay. So, Randy, coming to you on, again, more of a tactical type of footing. When you hear military leaders talk about a Pearl Harbor in space, and I'm asking you to speculate, but what do you think the first 24 hours looks like if China and Russia were to combine forces and attack all of our satellites before kinetic activity started on the ground?
Well, obviously that would put us at a great disadvantage because of how much we depend on satellite today. That would, I would hope that, again, that we have some sort of warning system that we know something like that's about to happen, or that, that our satellites are being attacked so that we could, counterattack. I wish I could speak more intelligently on that, but, the fact of the matter is, even the military relies heavily on satellite today, all kinds of stuff, weapon systems, communications, even land nav. And to think that all of a sudden you didn't have that available, I think it would cause a lot of confusion. And since most of our communications are on that now everywhere, including the Pentagon, I mean, it would put us in the blind, so to speak, which could be catastrophic, obviously.
Yeah, it's a scary proposition for sure. So moving into segment number 3, the Golden Dome, America's space-based missile shield. So the Golden Dome Missile Defense Initiative represents the most ambitious American military space program since the Strategic Defense Initiative, with Congress allocating roughly $13 billion in fiscal year 2026 for space-based interceptors, sensors, and integrated command and control networks. The program envisions a multi-layered shield combining space-based sensors, directed energy weapons, which we're seeing a lot more of, kinetic interceptors, and AI-driven command systems to detect and destroy ballistic, hypersonic, and cruise missiles before they reach American soil. Space Force budget is seeing a nearly 40% increase driven by Golden Dome, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has called for a new era of American space dominance, but classified program details and cost overrun concerns have drawn congressional scrutiny. So, Jeff, is the Golden Dome, the way it's being described, technically achievable with current technology, or are we looking at another strategic defense initiative that essentially never ends?
Yeah, it's technically possible. The Israelis have the Iron Dome. That's a close-in system. It's a theater defense type system. To make it truly strategic, you need to place it far away from the target country, in our case, us. And that's why you would have the interceptors and everything would be Greenland, Alaska, Canada, because if it's Russia or China, the shortest distance is over the poles. And the problem with SDI back in the 80s was the technology just simply didn't exist. That's not as much a problem now, but there are still, like the laser systems. Yeah, we have big, powerful lasers. We have them on ships and they can shoot down airplanes and things like that. But in the atmosphere, they have a very limited range because the atmosphere disperses and breaks up the beam. The best place to do it would be in space. Because there is no atmosphere to interfere with the laser beam. And the thing about lasers, they're instant. You see it, you point, you shoot, it hits it. The others would be kinetic kill vehicles. Ones you could launch, they launch up into the lower atmosphere. It'd be like launching, a Starlink satellite or a ship. Then you might have, 50 kinetic kill vehicles on it. And they don't have to be very big. They just have to be able to find their target and fly there. And then they may even be proximity where they explode and fragment and destroy the incoming, warhead. It's technically feasible. Is it going to be expensive? Yes. Is it going to be teething pains? Of course. But we've had kinetic kill vehicles in anti-missile systems for a long time. And some of the Patriot, I think Mod 3s are kinetic kill. They're shoot to kill. And I remember reporting on this stuff back in the 90s, and they were, they were effective then. So yeah, the technology's there. It's just, do you have the will to build it? Now that may not help you when it comes to submarine launched, because they can sit off your coast and there's no reaction time, and they don't get that high. Because you want to kill them when they're coming in, re-entering the atmosphere. And you don't want to necessarily kill them in space, because then you get all this debris in space and it takes out our satellites and their satellites and everything else. You want to get them on the way in, so even when you do hit it, what's left burns up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just a quick follow-up question before I go to Randy. We've seen some directed energy weapons. We saw them used in the Maduro capture. In your opinion, are the directed energy weapons that are part of the Golden Dome plan, are those ready for deployment, or do you figure that's still a ways off before it gets to the point where you can take satellites down in outer space?
I don't know how far developed they are now, but even if they do, now you got to figure a way to kind of almost mass produce them. You can't just have one laser. You're going to need more than one. You're going to need a bunch of them, and they've got to work every time. So they basically have to be 100% effective, or you have overlapping layers, and they still have to be high effectiveness, because, one warhead gets through, not good.
Yeah. So, Randy, I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit, but we saw when Israel gets attacked by Iran, for example. I think the last number I saw was 86% of the missiles coming from Iran towards Israel were taken down. And that system's been in place for years. It's been improved for years, expanded for years, and largely by us and our defense contractors. But I mean, we're an order of magnitude larger than Israel. I mean, this would be a massive, massive undertaking to try and get anywhere near that percentage of stuff intercepted. I mean, is this, in your opinion, is it feasible, or is this still stuff that's many, many years away, Randy?
Well, you know, just going on layman's terms and what we all know, you would think that that's just too much space to actually, too much mileage, too much land, too big of an area, because after all, Israel is very small, very tiny. It's a lot easier to do that. Now, but that being said, as I've said all along, you know, the DARPA has been out there for a long time, and DARPA's main gig, and it doesn't matter what they're doing, is to look 20 years out and try to bring that technology, or what they think the technology be in 20 years, and bring it in 5. And, you know, if we go back to, there are people now claiming, now again, I don't know if this is true or not, but the Roswell incident back in 47 or whenever that was, some people are saying we apparently used a energy weapon system that brought that UFO down. Who knows if that's true or not? What I do know is we didn't see it, but we've heard about it, a weapon system that was used on Maduro's raid, just like you just mentioned. We know that we saw the triangle back during October 7th, just knocking those ICBMs out. That was a directed energy weapon. And my point is, we have no idea what we have and what we're capable of. So it's kind of hard to answer that question, because I guarantee we probably don't know a tenth of what we have. And we can go back to when John Kennedy was president, right? This is a little different, but kind of the same deal, because it just shows the capability we had in the early 60s. When they came to him about the Cuban thing, one of their plans was they told him that we had the capabilities to remotely fly an airline, right? And they were going to use this airline to cause a problem with Cuba, and then we could invade them and oust Castro. But, you know, so that just so in 1961 or 62, apparently we already had the ability to remotely fly a civilian airline. So there's really no telling where we are in technology today, because it's just like the weather that I've talked about, with people like, oh, well, those patents don't mean anything. None of that stuff. This don't mean nothing. That don't mean nothing. But I can promise you the government hasn't spent this kind of money for 100 years on something that they have learned nothing. That I can promise you.
Yeah, true story. I mean, whether it be the weather manipulation stuff, I mean, you've got states admitting to it now, like Utah. Yeah. Has a very robust program that they've announced publicly. And we've gotten strikes on CommieTube for even discussing the topic. Ironically enough, the last strike that we got was when Doc Pete and I were discussing weather modification. But that's the end of segment 3. We're getting ready to move into segments 4 and 5. Just a quick mention for our premier sponsors, carnivalt.com. This is 100% American beef, grass finished, not just grass fed, no antibiotics, no histamines, no mRNA. Last year, there was a 49% year over year increase in wholesale costs. If you sign up for a subscription with Carnivalt, it locks your price in for 12 months. It's the best, safest thing you can do. And of course, this is freeze dried meat. So it has a 25-year shelf life. It reconstitutes in 5 to 10 minutes with some water and some salt or a bouillon cube. This is an amazing prepper product, but it's also an amazing product to eat. All of us eat it on a regular basis. And of course, I don't want to leave out our friends at wasatchwagyu.com, and I'll put some links in the live chat here in just a second. But for those of you who know, Wagyu beef has a high percentage of healthy fats in it. There's nothing compares to this jerky. I make sandwiches out of this jerky, and We're the only people who have a 25% off code. So if you go to wasatchwagyu.com, punch in code SD25, you get 25% off. And last but not least, our 33% off sale on SDN Guardian memberships ends at midnight tonight. Tomorrow, the price goes up for the first time ever. So you can get a monthly membership right now for $535 a month, or an annual one for $53.59 a year, which gets you another 2 months for free. Tomorrow, it's going to $9.99 a month and $99.99 a year. And that gets you into our survival dispatch emergency notification system. It gets you daily intel briefs. It gets you access to our community on Element, which is a server I built, ultra secure, ultra private. But with that being said, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming. Segment number 4, when satellites go dark, cascading infrastructure collapse. Every critical system Americans depend on daily, from GPS navigation and banking transactions to weather forecasting and emergency communications, routes through satellite infrastructure that was never designed to survive a contested space environment. A coordinated attack on American satellites would cascade into financial system failures, supply chain paralysis, military command fragmentation, and civilian communication blackouts, effectively shutting down modern life within hours. Russian satellites have already been conducting aggressive proximity operations near European and American communication platforms, testing jamming, cyber intrusion, and close approach capabilities that represent essentially rehearsals for wartime disruption. So, Jeff, if the GPS satellites, all of them, went offline tomorrow, what are the immediate second and third order effects on America in general? Not just the military, but the American civilian population.
You're going to see a lot of disruptions, primarily with shipping of materials, goods and certain goods. Truckers rely on GPS. You think they have every address in America memorized? No, they use GPS to deliver their products. I mean, paper maps. When's the last time you saw one? Truckers used to have a pile of paper maps in their truck so they could find places. Now it's all GPS. So delivery, home delivery, all that would just go out the window. Ships coming to port, they require GPS to find the right shipping channels, to avoid obstacles, reefs, things like that at sea. So you would see a huge, just chaos in all sorts of shipping. Another one is, airplanes. How do they know where they are? GPS. This isn't like the old days where you would fly and you would be talking to ATC, air traffic control, to various places as you went through. And they would say, okay, go on this heading at this speed and then this altitude, and then they drop you down another one. Nowadays, they take off. It's all pre-programmed, and they literally push the autopilot, and the pilots can go to sleep. That would go away. Everything would go back to like 1960s, 60s, 70s, 80s, before GPS, before any of that. And which is not to say that's impossible to do, but we're not set up for it. We don't have maps. We don't have that. It's not like you can just hand a driver a map that doesn't exist. There aren't maps. So they could, and it would screw up the delivery routes.
Yeah. So when I was researching just how intertwined satellites are into our country, I was surprised, because I hadn't thought about it in a while. I was surprised at how much information for financial institutions actually goes through satellites. And if you think about it, if you take a close look at a lot of banks, you'll see satellite dishes on the roof, on the side of the building. And we're not talking one, we're talking multiple satellites. So I was kind of surprised to find out that a lot of stuff does, from a financial perspective, depend on those satellite systems, and that many of those systems don't even have any land-based backups for some international stuff in particular. I mean, I think it's kind of a pretty easy question to answer, But maybe run with this scenario, Randy. Imagine that we're under attack, and it's China and Russia that want to knock us down before they launch any types of kinetic attacks, and they shut down the financial market, industry, everything, like banking, the whole 9 yards. What does that situation play out? And the reason I ask you is, what did it look like in Baghdad when people couldn't get money? They couldn't go to the bank and withdraw money, and they had nothing to spend money. Like, they had no money for groceries, all that sort of stuff. Maybe you can draw a parallel there.
Well, that's probably when they were out stealing everything, I would imagine. But as we've mentioned on this show before, what typically happens to that, and the same thing was in Iraq or in Baghdad, there was an alternate market. I mean, they already have markets there. So they're not like America, where when we go to the market, which isn't the market, we go to the mall, we go to the shopping center, we go to the store. And then we use our card, our debit card. Very, very few people still use cash or even write checks. So, if the financial system was just to all of a sudden go offline, the people that would do well have stuff already that they're going to be able to use to barter. Because obviously, if people can't get their money, first there's going to be panic. Certainly in this country, people will panic. It will be no different than, the beginning of the Great Depression. Look at all the mayhem and the chaos and even the suicide that happened at the beginning of that. And I think we would see something very similar. But even if the governments, or and all our agencies or people that weren't able to access money, that's going to be a real problem, obviously. I think the whole place grinds to a halt fairly quickly. And then you'll see madness. It'll be just like, now that is one of those things, like I said previously, people don't riot because some bad guy got shot. Even if it's a black guy, it's unarmed by a white cop who is. People don't normally just riot over that, certainly over several states or some big, huge riot that just keeps going and going and going. It's when people have real strife. When there's no food and water, people will get up and riot, and we will see that at some point. If the financial system was shut down because Russia and China just basically nixed our satellites and nixed our internet and electronics, that would shut the whole place down. Because again, as Jeff just mentioned, we could go back to older times, but it's going to take a little bit to get ready for that. We can't just go back even like us. Remember the old credit card machines? You put it in there and it had the prints, and and then you got one copy and they kept the others, and eventually it showed up on your bill the next month. But we don't have any of that stuff in place. We wouldn't be able to just go up, boom, and go right back to that. So it would cause some serious issues.
For sure. And follow-up question here, and we have touched on this topic in the past before, but it's good for a refresher. What are your recommendations for people to do right now, regardless of what may cause, the financial system to melt down or banks to close, networks to go down where they can't use ATMs? What are the things people can do right now to prep for that type of scenario, Randy?
Well, if you're lucky enough to have gold and silver, you may not have any problems. But then again, you're not going to want to show that once something like this happens, because that would create a problem. But, think of anything that may have value if all of a sudden people can't have money. And I'll go back, Chris Boehm just touched on it, but the fact is, it is, tobacco products, alcohol, things like that. When the whole system crashes in those stores or the supply chains crash. Well, I saw when we rolled out of Kuwait and started rolling into Iraq, within 2 weeks, everybody was out of tobacco. They didn't have any cigarettes. I mean, very, very few people did. And I saw people paying $20 for a cigarette.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, it's too bad I was a private. I didn't know how this rolls, because I would have brought me a couple of big black tack boxes full of tobacco products. I could have made some real money just off selling those products when there was no PX. It will be no different here. Anything that's a vice, and I know people, I'm not saying get in the drug business. I wouldn't do that. But anything that's a vice, people, when they run out, they're more than willing to pay way more than they normally would have and not even argue about it. So anything like that, and it's useful stuff. Somebody right here, Bic lighters, matches. There's going to be a lot of useful things that if you can't get, you're going to want to trade or anything you can to procure these items. And so, I mean, we could go down a whole list, but just think of it that way. Vices, habits, and then things that people need, even the little stuff. If you could start collecting that now and you have a fair amount of that on hand when things go wrong, like, I don't really drink much anymore. Rarely. I'll take some shots for some guys in memoriam of them, but I'm not a big drinker. So now when I get alcohol, I just I've got where I'm storing it. I have a ton of that stuff. And I'm thinking maybe I should start buying cigarettes and dip and adding to that, because at some point, trust me, that will be gold.
Great suggestions, Randy. And I see a lot of great suggestions in the live chat. For those of you who don't know, this is going out to 9 different platforms, and we get to see a mostly aggregated view of the chat. Some of the systems don't talk back to it, but somebody put, Randy, that's gone off my screen now, that when they served Copenhagen at $4 a can, they were selling it for $20 a can, which is, that's
when I say I saw people buying a cigarette for $20, I'm not kidding. Wow. And I won't tell you what I saw women do for one cigarette. I'm not kidding either. I'm not joking. I'm not embellishing it. It's left an impression on me that this is why I made this recommendation, because when people run out of cigarettes and tobacco, those people have to have it. So they're more than willing to pay a lot more than normal. They'll give you almost everything they have just to get some cigarettes or dip.
Yeah, vices are a great thing to stack up for this sort of stuff. So we're moving into segment number 5, the final segment for our main topic, which the sit rep will follow that. We'd kind of reversed order in this new format. So preparedness when orbit falls, communications, navigation, and grid independence. So the preparedness community must start treating satellite disruption as a when, not if scenario. Building communications independence through amateur radio, mesh networking, non-satellite dependent systems that keep communities connected when orbital assets go dark. Physical navigation skills, like Jeff mentioned, paper maps, compasses, land navigation training. They're no longer optional, but essential capabilities for any family serious about surviving a contested space environment that takes GPS offline. And financial preparedness, Faraday protection for your critical electronics, local resilience networks, maybe your church, maybe you have a MAG, mutual assistance group, a deep food and water storage. They're just must-haves, right? Food and water in particular. And at the end of the day, these are like the practical foundations that separate those who endure from those who collapse when the grid follows the satellite and both go down. So Jeff, I've never actually discussed comms with you, and we're getting ready to release our three-part series on 2026 SHTF comms. Dr. Mike and I have spent an obscene amount of money bringing in gear for it. But from your perspective, what's the minimum amateur radio setup that a family should have to maintain communications if satellites and cell networks and the interwebs all go down at the same time?
Well, it depends on who you think you need to talk to. If you got people across country you need to talk to, you're probably going to need a ham radio set. But if all you're worried about is your immediate family and you're not planning to go cross country or across the state, a GMRS system with enough radios for the family will, and with a CB radio kind of backup system would probably cut it. I think about my situation, right now it's just me and my wife here. I've got friends in the neighborhood. Okay, I can walk to their house. I've got a couple of, family members in the area, but they live close. Actually, one of them lives within walking distance. So I don't really need long range comms because who am I going to talk to? Yeah, I would love to be able to maintain contact with my kids in Seattle and Dallas, but they've got to have the same system on their end. And if they don't, it's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, it is. So Randy, a couple different scenarios here. You pick whichever one you want. And for those who don't know, Randy was an Echo for a period of time when he was a Green Beret. So that means on his team, he was the comms guy. Did y'all ever do anything, Randy, with regards like Faraday protection, Faraday bags, Faraday containers to protect your comm stuff? No.
Now at this point in Iraq and certainly Baghdad was a mature combat zone, and we didn't shield anything.
Fair enough. So let me ask you this then. Was there, without divulging anything yet divulged, was there any use of mesh networking where you're bouncing comms off of somebody else to get to somebody else sort of thing, or is that classified?
No, that did happen in Africa and places like that. But in Iraq, at this point, and in Baghdad, it's one of the things I said. Now, we still had a zipper net. What that was going through, I don't know, because it was set up. Somebody else set that up before we got to that team house, right? So I don't know who ran that. But even our internet runs through local providers, right? It's kind of how the way it goes over there. It's probably why in the beginning you couldn't bring your own phones and all that kind of stuff. But even our little internet rooms that we set up had to go through a local provider, which has its risk all on its own. But and we didn't have an enemy in Baghdad or Afghanistan. Iraq, it's possible that China and Russia would be different. It's possible. But we didn't have an enemy that had any capability of capturing our signal and decoding it, or any, of any kind of intercepting our signal and being able to understand what it was saying, because it was all encrypted, And I think I mentioned it before, the encryption changed every week of life. And so I had to, I think it was probably once a quarter, I want to say, we had to go down and we brought our little device that has all this. In fact, it has the entire everybody's in the entire military that's in theater. And so it's a top secret device. So we go to the place that, the communication guys that then fill this thing for us. Then I would go back to the team house and go and change out every radio that we had, including all the personal radios at each. And at that point, we hadn't switched all the way to the Harris's, so everybody had embeds as their personal radio. And so that had to be changed every single week. And you had to follow, the set schedule, we'll say.
I appreciate that extra information there. So I know who built ZipperNet. It was us at Sun Microsystems.
I don't know how we had that set up in Iraq and Baghdad, who they were going through, to get online. I would assume that we had something that because it was a different device. I wish I could remember the name. We never used one, but when I went over there, this is what they had on the ZipperNet radio or the ZipperNet, and I'm assuming that's what drove it. I just don't know what it is. So that's what I meant.
Yeah. So, again, it was a Sun Microsystems project in the early 1990s. And it's, for those who aren't familiar with the term ZipperNet, Secret Internet Protocol Router Network, it is not just logically separate from the interwebs. It is a completely separate internet. It does not share any infrastructure with the regular internet, and it's managed by DISA, Defense Information Systems Agency. It's essentially a secret internet for military operations, intelligence, diplomatic communication. We can communicate with other countries through it. And again, it is completely separate from the public network. So
you can just put it this way, Chris, when Hillary had her little server in there and she was running top secret stuff over, that's why it was a problem, because they took it off the ZipperNet and they put it on the green net, which is the one we're all on. And that's the ZipperNet is where all the top secret stuff is. It's where all the intelligence agency networks are. It's very, very, very important and vital stuff.
Yeah, I mean, great example, Randy. Fantastic example. Unless you're using some sophisticated methods, sending an email to somebody is like sending a postcard across the country. Anybody with a modicum of skill can read all of that stuff. So it's not very secure. I wanted just to hit a couple questions here from the audience or statements. So John Fernandez nails it here. Every person has a different situation, have to deal as needed. That hits it right on the head. Alessandro, is that right? Yeah. Alessandra says, what about emergency update? So Guy, shortly after that mentioned NOAA emergency band radios. And so we're going to cover them in part 2 of the 2026 SHTF com. So the first one's on satellite stuff. The second one is on these NOAA emergency radios, HTs, which are your handsets, hybrid devices like the POC links. And then number 3, and there's an article and a video for each one, is going to cover shortwave high frequency, which is the stuff that can go across the country and around the world. So with that being said, I've introduced something new into our format. As you probably noticed, we're in a whole new format here. When we get to the end of the main topic, we're going to cover what's called the practical payoff. So that's one skill, one item, and one mindset shift for all y'all relative to the main topic. So the skill for tonight is learn basic amateur radio operations. Get your technician license. It's not that hard. And HF, VHF, UHF radios, this is the only thing that's going to work in a Walking Dead situation where cell towers are down, internet's down, satellites are gone. That's it. For an item, build a Faraday cage from a trash can or something like that doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars to protect your stuff. I've done videos on this. If you go to our YouTube channel, you see videos on how to make your own Faraday cages without spending a lot of money, but put your stuff in there, right? Like put your small solar charge device, to power up your phones and your radios, rechargeable batteries, backup radios, all of that stuff, USB drive loaded with all your critical infrastructure. And a mindset shift would be stop thinking of space as something that happens far away and start treating orbital infrastructure as the invisible foundation that our lives sit on. And when that foundation breaks, we're toast. So coming to you first, Jeff, on the final leg of tonight's main topic, what skill do you think, you just have to name one skill, you don't have to do an item or a mindset shift. What's one skill that you recommend that people have under their belts before shit really hits the fan?
Yeah, it's hard to just list it to keep it at one.
Your videos froze too, Jeff.
Oh yeah, let me get in there and try and fix it. If I lower the definition, it'll probably kick in. Yep, there it goes.
There you go.
I would, believe it or not, the ability to grow your own food.
There you go. That's a good skill.
If you can grow your own food, you don't need a whole lot of other people for much.
Grow your own food and have some chickens, huh?
Yeah, well, that's growing your own food. You grow them chickens,
right? Randy, if there was one item that you would recommend people go out and buy when they can afford it, what would it be?
Well, again, it's like Jeff. It's kind of hard to put it down to one just thing, but if you don't have a gun, you might want to get a firearm and some ammo.
Yeah.
And I think beyond that, it comes down to the most important thing is water. So do you have a way to clean water so you can drink it and ingest it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely critical stuff. So that wraps up our deep dive on the space colonization race and the military fight for orbital dominance. But we're not done tonight. Stay right here because we're transitioning straight into, we have to figure out this new format, Randy. I mean, when do we do the
3-2-1?
3-2-1. I mean, I guess we're going to have to do it right here. 3-2-1. We've got to find a better spot to insert that when we go into the Carnival sit rep. So the way that I'm doing the sit rep, and I started on Friday and I did it again last night on my personal podcast is that we'll go through the interesting stuff in my bookmarks, my X bookmarks, and there's no set time for this. We won't run for hours or anything like that, but there's one really brutal piece of news from today. If y'all didn't catch this, man kills his wife, 2 kids, and then himself at Rhode Island ice skating rink, 44 seconds. So the story on this is that a guy went to this arena, killed 2 of his 3 children. He shot 3 of them, but 1 survived, and killed his wife, then killed himself. Jeff, I'll come to you first. And there's a reason that I played that video showing everybody scattering. I know it's easy to be an armchair quarterback, but what did you see in that video that those people did that you recommend they shouldn't do? And what did you see in that video that you think they did a good job of?
Well, the kids got off the ice because you have no cover there. And so, yeah, you need to find, first thing you need to do is find cover till you can assess the situation, like something basic, like which direction are the gunshots coming from? Because the last thing you want to do is, if you're trying to beat feet and get off the X, you don't want to get off the X by running straight to the shooter. So you need to kind of assess where the shooter is and maybe go the opposite direction.
Yeah, good advice. Randy, I mean, I think you and Mike Glover and I were discussing this at one point in time, because Mike was a sniper, but running away and obviously running towards somebody who's got a gun's not the best idea, but going laterally is a harder shot for somebody. Did you pick up anything in this that made you go, holy shit, they shouldn't have done that? Or did you pick up anything that you felt like somebody deserved kudos for doing something right?
Well, I thought the same thing Jeff did. You know, it appeared nobody knew exactly where the shots were going, because everybody ran every different direction, including some of those on the team decided it would be better just to get on the ice and skate across to the other side, which I thought maybe is where the shooting come from, but I'm still not sure where that was. But I would like to point out something that I really thought right when I first saw that and everybody scattered, as we've talked about over the last several weeks, is that adrenaline shot, right? When it hits you, you have no control over what you're doing for 4 or 5 seconds. And we just saw that straight out on video. That's why everybody just ran every direction, because they didn't really know what to do. And then when that fight or flight hit, they just took off. You know, sometimes it makes you freeze, but sometimes you just take off running. And it's exactly what we saw. There was no organization, and no one knew what they were even doing, except I'm just going to run to wherever they thought maybe the nearest exit or the nearest way out. So, you know, a very dangerous situation. It's an unfortunate situation, because the guy went there and killed his wife and 2 of his 3 children and himself. But what if he'd have kept shooting? You know what I mean? Then it could have been a lot worse, is my point, I guess, because people had no idea what they were doing or where they were going to go. And this is, you know, it's going to lend to what any kind of attack like this brings on, right? Because nobody's really ready for it, and you don't really have a plan.
Yeah. I think the only way to do it is do scenario training like Philip does at WAFT, right?
That's really the only way, but unfortunately, we're not all going to be able to do that.
Yeah. So I just want to pull this up quickly from our friend Sam Shoemaker on X, and he's one of Doc Pete's guys. So if you look at the date on this, September 26, 2024. So that's when Doc, and you can see Doc Pete Chambers mentioned right here, received the intel that the Sinaloa cartel and Hezbollah had brought 9 man pads across the border into America for the sole purpose of taking down Donald Trump. And of course, this was prior to the election. Jeff, the man pads being shoulder fired, they're fairly small explosive. My understanding is the optimum time to use it when a plane is taking off and it's full of fuel, but maybe just describe what a man pad actually is for the audience. You're on mute, Jeff.
Yeah, I've had possession of a few in my day. Man pads or man portable, air defense systems, you think about a Stinger missile is a man pad. The Russian SA-7, the Chinese HN-5, they're a shoulder-fired missile. They're normally heat seekers. They have a limited range and a fairly small warhead, but because they're heat seekers, they go for the engine exhaust. And if you put even a small warhead in the ass end of an engine and it goes off, that airplane's probably going to come down. They're not a high altitude weapon. They're not a long range weapon, but they can be effective. The Stinger is very effective. That's what we gave to the anti-Soviet guys in Afghanistan back in the day, and they were shooting, fighter bombers and attack helicopters out of the sky right and left. The Russian stuff, which I had possession of in Afghanistan, was really kind of crappy. Didn't work that well. But, it only has to work once.
Yeah. So I just want to say there was obviously intelligence prior to this that the IRGC and Hezbollah, which is Hezbollah Unit 910, it's worldwide. It's not one unit, have wanted to, kill President Trump. But again, Doc Pete was the one who broke the intel. And just because I happened to be engaged with him that night, we were one of the first ones discussing as well. But Randy, talk to me about man pads. Did y'all use them when you're in the Green Berets? Any thoughts or insight on them? The rumor is now, and it's unconfirmed, but that there's something like 40 or 50 of them in the country now.
So I didn't, because I was in Iraq. If I was in Afghanistan, it would probably be a different story. But even there, most of what we were shooting was ground-based stuff. They didn't have any aircraft, and it was javelins. And there were some AT-4s still around, but mostly things got transitioned to the javelin because it's so much more effective. But I will say, and again, we don't know, how effective it'll be against Air Force One either, because apparently that plane is like no other plane on the earth, and it has all kinds of detection systems and then some other things to help it avoid that kind of thing. But as Jeff mentioned, these things, it's not like, the plane is way over there and you're shooting this thing and it takes minutes for it to go over there and track it. And I would suspect it's something very similar to what brought down Extortion 17, because it came over a ridge line and then it got hit. And we know that thing blew up in midair and everything rained down. And that's how we know that the fuselage blew up on impact of the explosive in the air, when most of the time when you get hit by an RPG, the bird wheels all around them, it crashes, and that's where all the debris is. So these things are obviously, we don't want them in this country for that very reason, because even if they didn't go after President Trump on Air Force One because of the plane it is, you think about if there's 50 in this country, that's 50 planes they could shoot down, regular civilian airlines over, populated areas, and the amount of damage and fright and chaos that they could cause by that right there is also very significant. It would shut down air travel. One or two comes down, they'll close off air travel.
Yeah. So the Delta commander that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, who's a friend of mine, who's now stationed in Israel, awaiting orders on what happens with Iran, is also close to Doc Pete. And at the time, he did a deep dive on Trump Force One. So theoretically, only government-owned planes are supposed to have the anti-missile defenses. What are they called, Jeff or Randy, where they let the flares off to attract the missiles? You're on mute, Jeff.
They have the flare the ones that can shoot out the flares, and they also have chaff generators, which throw strips of aluminum out there to deflect them if they're a radar guided system.
Gotcha. So at the time, my understanding is that you can't just put them on private aircraft. But when this guy did a deep dive into Trump Force One, he was able to confirm unequivocally that it had those defenses in place. And by the way, there's Doc Pete today, sent that to me earlier today. And he's in the middle of a 40-day fast right now where he's drinking nothing but liquids. I asked him where he'd like me to send him a sandwich or two, because
you're cruel.
Well, I mean, look at him. If he turns sideways, he'd disappear. Anyway, with
He
that,
definitely needs that dill pickle sandwich.
no, the dill pickle sucks. Nobody uses the dill pickle. I got the dill pickle bases covered. Don't worry about that. But anyway, here's Doc. This was posted yesterday. Guess what? Facebook muted the same video today, claiming copyright violation. Oops. You can't mute the word of God, especially the red letters. 37 seconds.
Hey, Doc here. Talk about it in James all the time, the servant's heart. The greatest of these being a servant. Here it is in Mark, and it's on this statue behind me. Yet it shall be none among you, whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever of your desires to be first shall be slave to all, a servant to all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life for a ransom to many. Servant's heart.
So Doc Pete is the head of Remnant Church in Texas. And
so let me guess, they kicked it off because of the song you can barely hear in the background.
Yep.
Because I can't even identify what song it is. Otherwise, they would have to say he's copyrighting the Bible, which you can't do. So it makes no sense.
Well, as you know, we got smoked on Facebook last week, and they said it was because we were promoting suicidal crap, which we were doing no such thing. And when I appealed it, they basically said, too bad, so sad. So we will never do anything on Facebook ever again, period. So let's move on to the next one here. This is 1 minute and 40 seconds long, but I love Chad Prather. And this is a great take on people thinking that there might actually be consequences and accountability. I don't think we get a shot of this woman's face in this, so we can't do the 1,000 milligram stare poll, but she's batshit insane.
This is some high quality entertainment.
Okay, let's put me under arrest.
I'm not arresting you now.
Hey,
Now you're
okay.
under arrest.
Let's do this. Okay.
You're under arrest for battery, police officer.
Okay, can I put this in front because I have a back issue?
No.
I have a back issue.
You are under stop resisting.
I have a back issue. Okay, brain disease. I can't.
Stop.
I can't. Okay.
Relax.
I have a back issue. Relax.
Okay.
I'm on muscle relaxers. I have
Hold
a
it.
lidocaine.
Can you close? Relax, Miss Boy.
Back issue. Okay. Just relax, and then we'll get it all taken care of. Okay. I don't want to be raped.
You're not being great.
It's all recorded. Okay.
That's just me right here.
Please stop. Please, I will do anything. I'll just go home. I'm sorry. Please stop. Okay, stop resisting and give me your arm.
Okay, she claims to have a back issue. She didn't have a back issue when she put her hands behind her back, and she didn't have a back issue when she pushed the cop. But then she claims that she needs to be cuffed in front because she has a back issue. Why'd you put your hands behind your back? See, you didn't think there were going to be any consequences. See, that's these people who have a mental capacity of a hockey puck that's been slapped around for an hour. They don't think. They don't realize that when the consequences happen, they're not going to be comfortable. Everything is not a viral clip. It's not. There's actual consequences in the real world. God, please, we got to bring back some kind of insane asylums, some kind of institution. If you are forced by law to love this person, get them some help, okay? Because I know you're not doing it by choice. Like somewhere contractually, you either married that or you birthed that. Get them some help.
Oh my God, Chad Prather's friggin' hilarious. Jeff, any comments? I mean, I think this is the result of bad parenting.
Yeah, and just stupid people who think there are no consequences to their actions. They're just morons.
Yeah, mentally ill as well. Randy, your thoughts?
I was like, man, what is she, like 5 years old? And then maybe we should just post this for everybody she knows can see this. If that doesn't embarrass her enough to fix it, I don't know what would. But maybe this is a badge of honor to her. But the way she was apologizing in the end, I don't think so. But geez, man, it's just are there any adults left today, or is it all just all the 50, 60, and 70-year-old people?
I have no idea, but I want to get both of your comments on this. So the Health Ranger says this is starting to look like a trap to sink a significant portion of the U.S. Navy. 1/3 of the U.S. Navy fleet has been deployed for Iran. Let me pull this up full size here so you can have a look at it. Jeff, your thoughts on, do you think that they're setting a trap by drawing us in like this, or is this hyperbole?
I think it's hyperbole. I don't know who they are unless you're talking about the Iranians, but one, aircraft carrier battle group could wipe out their entire military. And we have 2 over there. Yeah, it's not good for them.
I wouldn't expect so. Randy?
Well, I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, does Iran even have a Navy or a real one? I mean, what are they going to do? They're not. I'll tell you what they're going to do. Nothing. They're not doing a damn thing. Because they can't. If they do, as Jeff said, we will just sink every one of them and then take out whatever they've got left on land as well.
So do we roll the dice and play this next one of this doctor who did a long-term study on dosages for ivermectin and cancer, or do we just throw the link in the live chat for everybody?
Well, it depends on if you want to get smoked or not, Chris.
Right. One more strike on our larger YouTube channel, and it's toast. So you know what? We'll just send it out here to everybody in the live chat. Watch it. If you know somebody who's got cancer, look into that. It's eye-opening. Absolutely eye-opening. All right. So next one up, highly illegal in America. Josh says, we need to start talking about legalizing electronic warfare devices under the Second Amendment. I want radio jammers. Now, I've never seen them in this type of a configuration where you get 6 of them hooked up to some sort of battery backpack. Jeff, your thoughts on that setup in particular?
Well, it's stupid for a number of reasons. One, you may give yourself cancer. But you don't have a Second Amendment right to keep other people from talking on their radios or cell phones.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
Fair enough.
I'm trying to call an ambulance for my kid because they fell and cracked their head open. Some idiot has one of those. I'll shoot him first and then call the.
There you go. Yeah. These are highly, highly illegal in America. Randy, you were an Echo without disclosing anything. You can't. Do you have any experience with these devices?
No, not anything like this. We did have jammers, but they were inside the Humvee, and they were serious. They're classified, and they actually work, which I always felt sorry driving around watching what the conventional forces had on their vehicles. That's why they got blown up every day of life, because in fact, I don't think they were very effective. Gotcha. But my first thought was, one of the things that we've mentioned in the last couple of days. Well, no, I was talking to my kids, but I know I've mentioned it on the show, right? So people think GI, because of GI Joe, means soldier, right? Or Marine, and it means you're in the military. No, well, it does mean you're in the military, but GI means government issued, folks. You sign your name 30-something times, just like you bought a house, because you're signing your life away. My point to it is, you think this guy wanted to wear that? Probably not, because as Jeff mentioned, it's probably not safe for his health. But guess what? He looks like he's in uniform. He doesn't get a choice. You think all those people wanted to go out in the desert in the 50s or the 40s, whenever they dropped that bomb, and watch it? Probably not. But they were ordered to, so they went and sat in the trench and they watched us blow up a nuclear bomb, and we got information from that. But my point to that is, when you're in the military, you don't get to choose whether you're going to do it or not. It's handed to you, you do it, and in fact, there's a lot of guys in special operations over the last 10 years that have died of some pretty rare and pretty aggressive cancers that we really haven't seen before. So it's an interesting topic. You know, it could have been stuff like this. It could have been the depleted uranium rounds. I'm sure that the government doesn't want to get down to the bottom of it, so we won't really know what's causing it.
So I'm going to, you know, choose my words carefully here so we don't get another strike. But those devices that guy was wearing emit microwave radiation, and it's in the microwave frequency. So 50%-ish of scientists worldwide say that microwaves in large doses are carcinogenic. And then the other 50% say it's not carcinogenic because it's non-ionizing. But the people in the first bucket say doesn't matter if it's ionizing or not. So I can't speak to that because I'm not an expert on cancer and whatnot. What I can tell you, and Jeff has covered this multiple times, what's the one thing that microwaves do, Jeff?
They excite water molecules.
Which means what? What's
They
the
heat them. They cook them.
They cook them, right? So I've got an EMF meter. I've measured a bunch of stuff like this. The supposed safe threshold is 40 volts per meter. We found multiple devices on our property, everything from the smart meter to, believe it or not, an internet router to an all-in-one printer, that many of them were over 500 volts per meter. And I have an expensive EMF meter, and it shuts down at 999 volts per meter, and a couple devices shut it down. I watched it go up to 999, then poof, shut down. So they're now saying it's the number one cause of dementia is cooking your cells, like Jeff said. All right, next one up. We got about 8 minutes left here. Hamid Reza something Far, senior advisor to the IRGC commander, said in a live broadcast that Iran will target U.S. bases across the region and also strike real estate assets in the Emirates linked to President Trump and his son-in-law, claiming it would personally devastate him. 35 seconds. First audience poll of the night. If you think this guy looks inbred, put a 1 in the live chat, because I'm all about the ones for this one.
اما تکلیف ما چیه؟ اینا بالاخره میزنن نمیزنن. اینها پیغام بهشون داده شد.
Whether they strike or not, they received a message.
این بار مثل دفعات قبلی نیست.
time
ما
won't be like
پایگاهتون
previous
در
times.
عراق و
Strike
در
on your
قطر
bases in
زدیم.
Iraq,
اینجا اگر
Qatar.
بکنیم
If you
به
attack
چندین
Iraq,
کشور این پیغام دادیم، کشورهای من.
countries in the
با اونا
region,
رفتن رسون. تمام پایگاهتون،
that
تمام منافع،
all your
تمام شرایط اقتصادی. تهران با این دامادش تو امارات و چند تا این کشورهای منطقه عجیب سرمایه‌گذاری شخصی کردن که اگر اینا از بین برن اصلا نابود میشن از نظر شخصی. مهمتر از مسائل امنیتیشونه. تهران اینجوریه. اعلام شد بهشون که تمام اینا مورد هدفه.
There you go. All right. So what do we got going on in the live chat here? If you think that this goat lover is a product of inbred practices, put a 1. There's a huge number. Jeff, do you happen to remember the number of Muslims in the Middle East that are inbred? It's an astonishing number.
Yeah, I keep thinking it was like in the 40-50% range.
Yeah, it's high. It's
all tribal politics. You want to keep power in the tribe, so you just marry within the tribe, and it just kind of keeps folding in on itself.
Yeah.
So it's not 85% like the Somalians?
That's just Somalian.
You're racist for saying that. You pointed out.
Oh, goodness.
I can't remember what it was. We were doing an episode on something, for those of you who don't know what Randy and I are talking about. And I asked a couple AIs, I said, why do all the Somalis look alike? And they both admonished me, said I was a white supremacist, that I was racist, and then went on to say, what was the number again, Randy? Was it 85?
Yeah, it was 85%.
That there's
share the same DNA, yeah.
Yep, 85% homogeneity amongst Somalians, hence the reason they all look the same. But for me, it made me a racist for mentioning it. All right.
Well, Archangel says that 65%, and I wouldn't doubt that that's probably not the Somalians.
Yeah, it's a big number. Regardless, it's a big number. So this one here, I want to do a serious audience poll on. No joking for this. And Jeff and Brandy, I want you both to comment on this. So INT Defender. Some of the final pawns needed across the Atlantic prior to future strikes against Iran are now being moved into place with a pair of E-3BC Sentry airborne early warning and control aircraft having departed Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska a short while ago. I have seen multiple people step forward in positions of power inside the military saying it's really, really hard to maintain OPSEC when you have people broadcasting all over the internet what planes we're sending and where we're sending them to. I'm all about full disclosure and stuff, but I personally think this is not helpful to us whatsoever and shouldn't be done. And I'm not a censorship guy. I'm a libertarian in spades with lowercase l. If you think that it is irresponsible to send this information out, because this account, by the way, this is every hour or two, they're blasting something out, telling the world what we're sending out there. If you disagree with this practice, put a 1 in the live chat. If you don't disagree with this practice, put a 0 in the live chat. Jeff, I want to hear your thoughts first on this type of information being widely distributed.
Well, it depends on how they're obtaining it. If they're just standing in their yard and they see a plane fly over and they see an AWACS and it's heading east, it's really hard to keep that secret because it's out there for everyone to see. It's kind of like when you've videotaped someone on the street, there's no expectation of privacy when you're walking down the street. If you're flying an airplane at low altitude and anybody can just look up and see it, it's kind of hard to tell them, okay, you didn't see that and don't pretend you did.
Yeah, so this stuff typically comes from subscriptions to this one's Flight Radar.
Yeah.
And so they're watching all of the air traffic, which is a shit ton worldwide, and manually picking through every plane that's in the sky, looking for military assets. Not that the Iranians couldn't do this, but it just seems it doesn't seem like a good practice to me to make it that easy.
If they're flying on a training mission and they head that way, you can't distinguish between a training mission and a real mission. And they fly training missions all the time. So the fact that they're leaving doesn't mean they're going anywhere of interest.
No, but they this particular account has tracked them all the way through to places in the Middle East. Randy, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's, I think they're turds is what I think. I think these are people that are doing just like whether it was the Signal app with Hegseth, or the stuff that came down that involved some other stuff. It's all these people are just trying to undermine the administration and embarrass them. And in this thing, I don't know what their intentions are, but, like Jeff said, there's a lot of training missions. But if they happen to get one of these pilots shot down or killed, then what? Because they released that information. Now, if it's days later, who cares? Generally. But if this is, live and current, or even within the last hour, that's putting people at risk. Loose lips sink ships, and that's the fact.
Well, like I mentioned, it's Flight Radar, so anybody technically could go get the information. But if you look at Flight Radar, the volume of traffic around the world is massive. And this guy in particular spends a lot of time manually picking through it. And I'm not saying that the Iranians can't do that as well, but regardless, it's probably information that would be better kept, keeping the cards closer to our chest. So this is the last one for tonight. A German girl decides to troll refugees by walking her pit bull in a Muslim majority neighborhood in Dortmund. Dogs are considered haram in Islam, and Muslims have this irrational fear of dogs. Notice how they're all terrified. So before I hit play on this dog is like the spitting image of our big blue pit who passed away from cancer about 1.5 years ago. His name was Billy. His brother Bob died 6 years before that. They were gaudy pits. It's a beautiful dog, but it's a good way to avoid apparently being raped and harassed by Muslims in Germany.
I was born with something inside me that refused to settle for change, and am grateful for it. I am a warrior, a destroyer, a force of pure violence, and all that I desire is the sheer glory of victory. Mercy is for the weak, surrender for those who have no conviction. I am coming for this world and all it has to offer. Nothing will stop me. I care for nothing else than to see my name carved in history and for the world to bow before my greatness. I am coming for it all.
So on this topic, did either of you happen to catch today that one of Ma'am Dammy's people in New York City said that dogs should not be allowed in houses? They're filthy. They're going to go after the dogs. Jeff?
I tell you what, going after dogs is going to be worse than going after kids, I think, because there's people love their dogs. I mean, I'll tell you what, someone came to my house and said, yeah, we don't like your dogs. We're going to collect it. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to collect something, and it's going to be 180 grains one at a time.
High-speed lead poisoning.
Damn right.
Well, Randy has a beautiful service dog. I mean, screw these people, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're like the ones, well, you shouldn't be able to sell pork because I don't like it. Well, how about this? Don't buy it.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Easy. Randy?
Oh, yeah. You know, there'll be old people that will shoot them down in New York City that they didn't even know how to gun. There'll be a little revolver. You know, but again, you know, Muslims don't like them. They don't. Anywhere, whether you're in Iraq or Afghanistan, there weren't a lot of dogs. People didn't have them as pets. And the dogs that were there were like the junkyard dog, you know, and they were just as you know, they weren't friendly. A lot of them got shot, frankly, because they're not friendly, and they're attack dogs. And they're not, they don't have rabies, but you know what I mean? They're disturbed animals for sure. And then you got to realize a lot of those people, let's just be honest, they have an odor. They stink, right? And what are dogs like? The stinkier, the better. So they're going to naturally be attracted. I was just enjoying how many of them like, whoa, instantly had to move over a couple of feet, you know. And I say if they want to go after the dogs in New York City, good luck.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find something here. I don't know have y'all heard of the ounce, the folding 22 caliber pistol?
I think I saw it this weekend. Do you have a video of it or?
I'm trying to pull it up here. So there's a waiting list, and I'm on the waiting list for it. Let me just get it up here on screen. Right there. All right. So that's it in this guy's hand. You put it in your pocket, of course. And let me get down here. So it's got quite a decent capacity. I want to say it's like 8 or 9. Something like that, but there it is.
It's not on the screen.
Yeah, we can't see it.
Hold on.
Looks great.
Looks just like Randy.
No, we're on the wrong stage. My apologies.
There we go. Yeah, I did see this.
Yeah. So it fits in your pocket, and again, I can't remember how many rounds it is. It's like $800 or something like that. Commie Tube. I'm not promoting this gun. I have no relationship with these people. It's just an interesting product. Nothing more. Nothing less, but as you can see, you know, pretty small pocket purse, whatever the case may be.
And the really cool thing is, you know, historically, this is more like a Derringer, right, or some little. But it isn't 1 or 2 rounds. This thing holds like, I don't know, 8 or 9 across 11. The top. That's pretty.
11.
I was like, man, that's pretty impressive.
10+1 semi-automatic 22 LR pistol.
Yeah.
Weighs 8 ounces loaded, half a pound. Loaded.
That's all the ammo weight.
Yeah, basically. So we were sent one of these from somebody else that looked like a cell phone, and it had 2 barrels, top and bottom. So you would flick it out, like you pull it out of your back pocket and you'd flick it, and then the first shot would fire the top one, and our second pull the trigger, shoot the bottom one. Jake and I are at the range in Sarasota. We had the target set at 10 feet. I shot it and he shot it, and there wasn't a single hole in the paper. And we were like, what the heck is going on here? So the top barrel was shooting to the left and the bottom barrel was shooting to the right. And in 10 feet, it was wider than a freaking, big target sort of thing. Just an absolute steaming pile of crapola.
Well,
So
the funny thing is those shorter ones, just like this one, it's like what I recommended women do last week, right? You don't pull that thing out until they're on top of you and they have their
Right.
hands on you, and you stick it to them and empty that thing. That's what this type of thing is for. And historically, Derringers or the smaller weapons like that, they don't aim very good, so you should wait, right? But that being said, they're not, they're little guns. They're not really made for long shooting of any type. And you just stick it up next to them and you don't have to worry about that 10 feet.
Cindy had Cape Fear playing yesterday, and Robert De Niro, the idiot, is going after Nick Nolte, right? Nick Nolte goes to his buddy and says, "I need a gun. I need a gun." And I can't remember the guy's name. He was a famous actor, but he says, "I got the gun just for you, a 38 snubby." And I said, "Yeah, that's a gut shot, like 5 feet in, basically." They're not exactly great. And by the way, this was our big boy who passed away 18 months ago.
Oh, buddy.
So he was 100-pound Gotti pit bull, purebred Gotti pit bull. And he lived to 11, but he's full of cancer. The smaller dog is our Bailey girl. She's about 60 pounds. But Billy looked identical to that dog in that video. I'm with Jeff. You touch our dogs and it's on. It's on like Donkey Kong, right? So anyway, we'll be back tomorrow night, usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern, with the next episode in our long war series, Global Surveillance Governance. The theme is going to be the control grid becomes permanent. And the summary is that elites push global monitoring systems under the guise of safety and peace. One last quick reminder, if you're not a Survival Dispatch Guardian, prices go up tomorrow, 33% off the current price, $535 a month or $53.59 a year. To join the Guardians, get access to all of our emergency notifications, which, by the way, we're lighting up another piece to the SDN system, which will be live private webinars and videos on our Element server for Guardians only anytime an SDN's alert goes out. With the Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System goes to your phone, it goes to it goes to your email, it goes to the Substack, and if you remember, you get access to all of that. It goes to our Element SDN's channel, it goes to our old Signal SDN's channel, it goes to POClink radios, and again, it's fixing to be a live video as well with myself and the team when we issue SDN's alerts. And you get access to all of our 20 plus Element channels that cover everything from survival prepping and everything in between, but it goes up tonight or tomorrow morning. So if you're not part of Survival Dispatch Guardians, get in there before the price goes up. Other than that, I want to thank our sponsors, Carnival and Wasatch Wagyu. Again, we'll be back tomorrow night, regular time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. God bless our law enforcement officers. God bless our troops. God bless America. Enjoy the closing video. It's a new one for SDN, but it's the same one I played on my personal podcast last night. It's a good one.
This is a national emergency. All radio stations and television networks cease their programs during this alert. Please stand by.
So dirty money, I'm consumed in regrets. Was I aware of all the trouble I'd get? I believe in you, let me help provide. There's nothing to fear. Now my world's imploding, I'm compromised, and no one can hear. He says, hush, hush. Keep your mouth shut, you'll get buried. Hush, hush, I own you now. You were greedy for cash flow. Me if love, it's all by design. He says, hush, hush, keep your mouth shut or you'll get buried.